actually, for an Apple II Rev Zero, I've done a reproduction of that. There's a couple minor tweak mistakes in it, but pretty much that's what it looked like. The original Apple II Rev Zero was laid out on a computer originally, and that's why everything's so uniform and looks so perfect. So it was actually easier for me to do a reproduction of this than the Apple I, which was laid out by hand. So anyway, next slide. Okay, so a little about me. I bought an Apple II in, according to the date on my keyboard, the spring of 1978. And I spent about a year learning kind of the rudimentaries of programming. I was in college at the time. I got a job as a intern at a local mini computer company. Anybody that was at the mini computer thing yesterday, I was not in one of the big three, but we had some awesome machines. I worked there about 13 years, ended up being a lead firmware guy for some I/O controllers and also the last CPU, proprietary CPU they did. And after that, the mini computer industry went like that, and I jumped ship, and I've been working in networking ever since. I worked for Cisco Systems as a software engineering manager. So that's me.
What were you studying in college?
I started out as a mechanical engineer, but I'm not a very good draftsman. And back then you had to draw. And I got rid of that, and I went into computer science. I actually never finished my bachelor's degree because to me work was much more fun than school. So that's one thing. Actually, Woz went back and got his degree. But anyway, so I want to get, how many of you guys have Apple IIs? How many of you guys have fixed your Apple IIs? Okay, about half of you. Have any of you guys worked as a tech in like an Apple store or nothing? Well, that's good, because I don't want to be overshown. I fixed maybe 8 or 9 of them, right? This is kind of what I've learned about, you know, I've got a couple off eBay. One was in, actually this one was in real rough shape when I got it. We can talk a little bit about that as it goes. But, so I fixed them, but basically, you know, this is about keeping them up and working. It's not really about software. And if you're crazy like me, you go, if you have an original Apple II and it's lost its original motherboard and you want to get it back to where it was, you build a new one. So that's why I build a reproduction, because I had my original Apple II, but at one point it was used in a business. The board failed. It was traded in and had a later board in it, so I wanted to get my original board back. And of course I could never do that, so I built my own. Okay, next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about cleaning them, finding components, maintenance, enclosure, motherboard, power supply, keyboard, disk 2. Next slide. Focus is on Apple II and II Plus. When I went into the mini computer industry, I kind of lost interest in microcomputers for a while, until the Macintosh came out. So I don't know much about Apple IIs kind of after 1980. So a lot of the Apple II crowd is into the GSs and stuff. I know nothing about those machines, actually, because I kind of went through a time warp. And when I got back into it, I was back into the 2s and II Pluses. The 2E's pretty close. I do have a 2C at home somebody gave me, and I powered it up once, and it's a neat machine. I don't have a GS. I've seen one run once. But this, hopefully this is useful for other vintage micros and other electronic stuff. Try to be as general as I can. Okay, next slide. Tools. You don't need a lot of tools in terms of hardware. A Phillips screwdriver. Oops, geez, I almost got your toe.
Oh, that's all right.
You need a pliers. I'll talk about that later. Get if you need to pull the motherboard, the chip extractor. I always use a screwdriver. I guess I'm a cheapskate. Anyway, next one. Multimeter. Important to get high impedance ohms function. Some of the older multimeters have really low impedance, and they can really screw up your readings. better meter you get, the better off you are. That said, I got about a $29 Sears job I use. Soldering iron, get one with a temperature controlled tip. If you don't have that, you have a good chance of lifting lands, causing damage to your PC board, because it's just gonna, the temperature controlled tip is gonna shut that thing off if it starts getting too hot. And if you just have one that's running hot, it's gonna just feed that heat in there and feed it in, and you can lift lands and cause damage. Spend the money and get a good soldering iron. If you end up, if you get into oscilloscopes, minimum 2 probes, I recommend 100 megahertz. Some people say you can get by with 20 megahertz, but 2 weeks ago I was debugging an issue. I had that thing cranked up to 100 megahertz and I wish I had more. So it depends on, you know, a lot of people, you can get by with less. You can always get by with less, but, you know, when you're at that 100, when I'm at that 100 megahertz and I wish I had more, you know, that, because you not only need to see this 1 megahertz signal, you need to see the relationship between signals. You need to see, okay, is there a glitch at the end of that signal as it comes up or down? And that stuff's much higher frequency than 1 megahertz. Chip clips, and then leads. Schematics. The Apple II, one great thing about the Apple II is they publish the schematics right from day one. And there's an Apple II reference manual where they got a fold-out schematic. And I've reduced it to 1 page, and unless you got a microscope, you really can't see what's going on. So the good old red book, they put it on multiple pages, and with my old eyes, I can see what's going on. I just turn to the right page. The later boards change some of the circuitry, but most of it's the same. So I use even the red book schematics for the newer boards, just because, and there are some mistakes in this, which I have documented on my website, but it's just, I can read this with my old eyes. So, next page. Okay, things like contact cement. The reason why I mentioned that, there are these things they call headlock connectors on Apple II. Sometimes, with age, they tend to pull off. You'll lift this thing off and it'll stay there. Just glue it back with contact cement. There's also a speaker mounted on the base plate. Contact cement will get it back. Although the later boards, they put it on, mounted it on foam, those don't fall off so much. And then if that comes off, contact cement. Paintbrush. Now one thing, I was in a model railroading for a while. I wish I had time to get back into it. What the model train collectors do when they get an old model train, they get a soft bristled paintbrush. They'll clean it off, the train with that. You don't want to, you know, be too aggressive, but they'll get the dust and stuff off just with an old paintbrush. Solder, get good quality solder. You might need resin. Not so much on Apple II. Some of the other stuff, if something won't solder, you might need to get a little spot of resin on there. That it's an acid that like etches the lead, so it'll solder better. Cleaners, isopropyl alcohol. I love this stuff. It's the stuff I use. It doesn't take.
Is that for internal parts, electrical parts?
Isopropyl alcohol?
Yeah.
Or, well, I use it on everything. It will take paint off, but it's not very aggressive, so you pretty much get away with using it anywhere.
Can you use any of that on the screen of the monitor?
I don't know. I mean,
well, the glass screen,
the
glass CRT, yeah, you can use alcohol or Windex.
Would that be like the 2C monitor, the 2E monitor?
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
The 2GS monitor?
Yeah, they're glass. The only one you don't want to use the harsh stuff on is the 3 monitor because it has that anti-glare coating on it, or that anti-glare mesh. But they actually suggest in the manual to use isopropyl alcohol on a soft cloth and blot it. Don't scrub it. That's only on the monitor 3 because it has that. It has like a screen mesh on it. All the other ones are glass, straight glass, and you can just clean with Windows.
You're talking about the monitor for the Apple III?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The rest of them are all just a glass picture tube. There's no anti-glare coating, so you can just scrub it with Windex and soft.
Oh, okay.
Soft
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ian. I use Gojo. That's a hand cleaner. You find at auto parts store for you know, you got a system that's been sitting, it's grimy, it's greasy. That stuff works wonders. This system I got off eBay was like 40 bucks or something. It was a mess. I took it out in the garage, ran Gojo over it, cleaned it off pretty well, and then of course I took all the electrical components out of there, the keyboard, the motherboard, the power supply, ran it through the dishwasher, and without any soap. And I just want to make sure that Gojo gunk was out of there, and you know, it came out okay.
Just a normal hot temperature of your dishwasher.
I just put it hot. I've actually, I don't know if that's later on. I'm probably going ahead of myself here.
Oh.
But I've run PC boards through dishwasher too.
Figure they can take heat, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
My wife loves that.
In what terms does she express her admiration of that?
I usually wait till she's not around.
Yeah, I do now too.
You can also use baby wipes too. It's scary, but
Yeah.
they don't take as much as the Gojo. But if it's not so bad and you don't want to start disassembling everything,
Yeah.
baby wipes is scary when you start wiping down computers. If you get it nice and because they're pretty moist. I don't mean the cheapy ones. It's the regular, you know, like a good brand, like a Huggies or something. You wipe it down and it peels the stuff off too. Not as good as the Gojo, but also you don't have to disassemble. If you're a little afraid about taking everything apart, because obviously you're only just putting the plastic part of the case in the dishwasher.
Yep. Let's move ahead. Okay, Apple II and Apple II Plus. It's basically three parts. Case, which is two parts, or three parts. Plastic, a metal base plate, and a speaker stuck in there. And that's it. The motherboard, one piece, one board. Actually, yeah, we can. Well, motherboard, 8 by 5 by 14 inches. That's an interesting size, isn't it? What is it?
Piece of paper.
Piece of legal paper. I talked to Howard Canton, who laid out this board on, you know, when the Jobs and Wozniak had it made. They went to him. He was like a go-to guy for getting boards laid out. And he said they had like 3 different configurations. And they came up with, one of the configurations was 8 by 5 by 14. And Jobs says, I like that size. Let's go with that one. Because it was a paper size. So that's not, it's partly a coincidence, but they did choose that size because it's the size of a piece of paper.
Oh, because there's a lot of storage spaces designed for legal paper.
Yeah.
You could probably fit this in.
Yep. Power supply. This is the famous switching power supply. And a keyboard. The keyboard was a modification of an off-the-shelf one made by a company called Datanetics. And I have a website where I talk about early Apple keyboards, and you look at the last Datanetics keyboard prior to the Apple II keyboards, they're almost identical. And they use the same. Datanetics had a patent and key switch, which is in here. And then the ubiquitous Disk 2. This is, everybody's seen these. So next page. Okay, that's the case. Next page. Okay, case maintenance. Keep it out of the light. You know, the old yellowing stuff, that's partly caused by light. I keep something draped over mine at home, at least the one I care about. To take it, I talked about the Gojo. If you have any holes in it, they can be pretty easily patched. My original keyboard, Apple II had a defect in the keyboard. Reset switch, return key, right next to each other. And the original ones, you hit reset at reset. There was no control reset. So I took this switch and I bypassed it to a toggle switch to enable and disable, drilled a hole right there. So my original Apple II had a hole right there. I filled it with Squadron modeling putty. But that ain't the best stuff because it shrinks as it dries. Bondo's a better thing to use. and just tried to match the paint as best I could. To get one of the base plate off, if we have time later, maybe I'll do it. Basically 10 screws, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then there's 4 down here. These other screws hold the power supply, and those hold the standoffs for the PCB. So it's basically the screws on the outside. Pretty easy to take apart. If I got time, I'll do it later.
Excuse me, what
Yep.
kind of paint were you using for touch-up?
Oh, I just use modeling paint. I was in the modeling
Training.
model railroads, and I just mixed it. And I used some. This wasn't the one I patched, but I used some silver in the paint, and for some reason that made it match better.
I think there's a really close, I don't remember, but one of the websites says it had a Krylon color that like you'd have to paint your own
The
case. It's
problem
pretty
is,
close, yeah.
so many of these have yellowed over the years.
Yeah.
You really got to match each one individually. I used to race sailboats, and I got in a collision. I took the thing to get it fixed. The guy matched it beautifully, but then he ordered the factory stuff, and he did it over with the factory stuff, and you can plainly see it. So you're better off just trying to match it by hand, because this case was whiter when it was new.
One of the websites you can give the Pantone color.
Yeah, but it's not going to work.
Right, it looks like a big white spot right on.
Yeah, I mean,
Unless you paint
I
the whole
suppose
thing.
if you did the retro bright thing, maybe it would be close. I don't know.
Has anyone tried the retro bright stuff on Apple
Yeah, I
II
have.
cases? Does it work? Does it work
Yeah,
well?
it
on
works
it?
pretty well. I
Right.
tried it on an old broken case I had.
Was it
I
2E or 2 plus? Because the 2E it isn't painted, the 2 plus is.
2E. I did it on a 2E.
Right.
The 2 plus is painted.
Yeah.
To
it's
me,
painted.
it's like a last resort thing. I have an Apple IIc that might get the treatment someday because it's so yellow.
They
it's
yellowed
disgusting. Yeah,
badly.
it's bad. And especially they come out when they're new, they're so white and everything, and they look bad. Okay, I talked about contact cement. Next slide. Okay, there's the motherboard. That's the whole thing. Processor, address bus drivers, data bus receivers, proms. This is all memory. This is memory decoding logic, and up here is mostly they decode these slots. So there's pins coming to each of these slots that are independent to say, hey, I'm talking to slot 5 and talking to slot 6.
Oh, so the 2 and 2 plus have, actually, you can put in cards in slots.
Yep. I mean, I got a little homebrew card in here. Hold on,
2
wait
on
a
the
minute.
2E also is.
Breadboarding area
Yep.
on these early model.
This is Rev 0. This is actually my reproduction, I think. They did put a breadboarding area in there. There's also an Apple I. And early on, one of the early Apple newsletters had a, I guess I'll talk about this while I'm here. Had an update because it was color all the time, but the color would bleed, and the way text was generated, you'd see color fringing on the text. So when it was in text mode, they had a transistor to kind of turn off the color burst. And that was not on the Rev 0, so they sent in a newsletter, go down here in this proto area, add the transistor wire here, there. So Apple was actually sending out notes on things to do in the proto area. It doesn't always work because the transistors, some of it would seep through anyway, and some TVs were sensitive enough they'd still pick up the color burst. So memory here. This is 48K in this one. You could have 4K or 16K DRAMs. Back when these things came out, list price on 16K DRAMs was like $30 each. So 48 times 30, I don't know what that is, but it's a lot, $1,500 or something. When I bought mine, I bought it with 4K. I added 2 16K banks. It cost me 6 weeks' salary. I was a kid working in the $60 a week, something like that. Character generator, all the video stuff, most all of it's down here. So it's pretty well laid out. And then you've got I/O port, cassette interface down there. Next slide, unless there's some questions or anything. Next slide.
Nice.
Okay, go back one. Motherboard cleaning, or cleaning and maintenance, I should say. first thing I would say, if it works, don't fool with it. The sockets and especially the original boards are bad. And the more they get monkeyed around with, the more trouble you're gonna have. And it's just, you might fix it for a day and come back 2 days later, darn thing's not working again, some other connection went bad or something. So, to me, the less you touch them, the better off you are. If something's broke, obviously you want to get it working and you want to get it fixed. But to me, the less you do with them, the better. Cleaning, like I said, the soft paintbrush, you can use compressed air, but be careful of static. I don't worry about that because I know I can find every part on these boards. So if I blow a part, I can find the part. You guys might be in a different situation, so be aware of that. I live in a place where I don't walk around the house and touch a doorknob and get shocked. So I have pretty high humidity in our area, so I don't have too much of an issue. Anyway,
I have a question.
Yep.
What percentage of alcohol do you use?
I use as high as I can find. The highest I've ever found is 91%. I mean, people will come in these presentations, you see online, use 99%. I've never seen it. Maybe you can get it from a scientific supply place or something, but go
Sometimes
to
a dollar store.
What?
Depends on what they have.
I've never up in Massachusetts. I've never seen anything higher than 91%.
What I have in my medicine cabinet's 99%.
I've had
That's just
99,
Really?
yeah.
from
Yeah, I wish I knew
but
where I
it
could
is rare.
find it. but-
In Europe,
can't find it
most kind of hardware stores will sell higher stuff.
Yeah,
I think
maybe.
my local, I think just
I just have
98
never
off the
seen
shelf.
it. I've looked around hardware stores everywhere. I know I can get it online or.
Yeah,
Regs are different.
very different.
My assumption, I mean, the reason why I like this stuff is it evaporates. But if you're using it to clean, it's going to evaporate and leave the dirt back there, right? so use a lint-free cloth to get the dirt out while it's still there. Or else it's just going to settle back down or just move around. Okay.
And the paintbrushes, does it matter what kind? You can get it at the dollar store? Or?
It's just got to be soft, so it's not going to scratch the paint or the surface. Right?
I go
so
to
you
an-
want something that feels real soft.
I go to an arts and crafts store and not arts and crafts, like a hobby shop that sells model trains,
Yeah.
because you're going to use it often enough that you might want to spend about $4 or $5 on it and get like a nice soft bristle brush.
My wife's an amateur artist, so I use her cast-offs, and they have really nice brushes.
Camel hair brushes are really good.
I use them for painting the trim on the houses too. But as long as it's soft, you don't want anything that's stiff enough that it's going to scratch the surface.
Interrupt? Dan Cockney, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, Dan. So welcome, Dan. I'm Mike Willegal.
Hi, Mike. Yes.
Want to join us or offer any comments or whatever? You're welcome.
Okay.
Well, he'll be giving a keynote at 12:30.
Yeah.
I'm going to show him around a little bit, and he'll be free to
Okay.
roam. Okay? If you guys have technical questions, I mean, one of the inventors of the product. So Wozniak sends his regards. He said he was in the country one day this month. He does send his regards.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I'll do that. Okay. That's awesome. Okay, paintbrushes. Okay, next one. I talked about the wear and tear of the socket. You don't want to be pulling things. I mean, this is what I call the pseudo-random chip swapping method of repairing a board. And you see it on the websites, on the boards all the time. Somebody will say, I got a problem with that board. And the first answer is, oh, pull all your chips and put them back in. I just hate that answer because you're putting wear and tear on those sockets. But
Is it just the mechanical properties of the sockets that we use on the board that just
yeah,
makes
they're pretty bad.
Right.
They're
Low quality plastic, I guess.
well, I mean, I use on my kits, I use machine pin sockets.
Right.
And that's when I worked in the mini computer industry, we always used machine pin sockets. Apple used probably dual wipe sockets, and they just don't hold up as well. And then, with, just age and whatever.
Yeah.
We used to, when I was doing tech support schools, we used to reseat them a lot and just push them down.
Yeah, if they work them, I mean, you got to do
Right,
that.
so
I
that
mean,
would supposedly clear off some of the oxidation.
yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people fix their boards this way. They'll, just some people have two boards and they'll swap all the chips from one board to the other, you know, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But, you know, to me, it's a lot of wear and tear.
I represent the ignorant portion of the audience. What's IC?
Integrated circuits, the chips.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And so I'm kind of against that, but I have the knowledge, I have the tools, so I'm gonna, you know, I'm sympathetic to people that do that to repair their boards. But Apple service notes, they're online in a couple places now. They're basically a guide. If you have this symptom, it's probably one of these chips. I think it's hit and miss. It's maybe 30 to 50% chance they'll be right. But, you know, if you're doing the chip swapping thing, start there, you know. But, you know, a lot of the things are pretty good there. Next slide. Here's the way I do it. Usually. I mean, sometimes I'll see if there's a loose chip, but generally I like to do it this way. Repair through debug. Check the voltages first. You got a good power supply. It's like, make sure it's plugged in, right? Once you get there, if you have video, you're a step ahead, right? If you don't have video, work on the video section first. Because it's hard to debug the processor section when you can't tell what it's doing with anything other than the scope. And I work from the output stage back to the DRAM. There's basically this can be too small to see, but basically in the schematics, here's the outputs, and you just it basically split by 3 resistors into 3 circuits. One's the color burst. If you don't have color, or you're not worried about color, that's no big deal. You can worry about that later. And then you've got the horizontal and vertical blanking, and then you've got the actual bits. And it's basically split into 3 sections. So you just start here, you know, do I have each of those 3 signals? Work your way back. If you get the video working, but the thing's not booting, then I go the opposite way. I work from the CPU toward the memory. So the memory's kind of in the middle of the system. So you work from the video back to the memory, because the video is drawn from the memory to generate the picture. So if you got a picture and it's stable, it's not, you know, changing characters or whatever, you got a stable DRAM, your memory's working. Then if it won't boot or you can't get a prompt, you start from the processor, check every bus pin, basically the address data bus on the processor, then go to the address drivers, make sure all your address lines are being driven, they look correct, and then look to the data bus. Make sure the data bus transceivers are working, and from there you can work back. But basically, that's what I do. If it's booting but it's flaky, typically it's a memory addressing issue. There's an address select bit, maybe there's 2 banks of memory mapped to the same place. Yesterday I did an upgrade in the exhibit on this system of 4K to 36K with some memory 16K DRAMs I pulled out of language card that I never had run. And it turned out I got AppleSoft booted on it. Because this is an integer basic system, but it said there was only 5K DRAM, and with 36K, AppleSoft's not 31K, so something was flaky about it. And what I did was I went into the monitor, the Apple monitor, and basically used the monitor to write each bank of RAM, at the beginning of each bank of RAM, a unique piece of data, right? And then I read back them, and it turned out I typically use a pattern to start with, like, of all ones and all zeros. So I'll write a byte of all ones and all zeros. I'll read it back, and if it reads back all ones and all zeros, then you get more sophisticated. But it turns out 2 of the DRAMs are bad, and they were always reading 1. And so and then from there I could tell which bits you know, and the DRAMs were bad, which DRAMs were bad, popped it up, put 2 others in, and it was up and going. Sometimes you'll have like a memory addressing issue, where the address decoders, you know, there's a bit floating or something due to a bad chip or a bad connection, and you get some funny behavior. Sometimes you'll get like DOS to boot, and other times not. Usually it's an addressing issue. If you have an Apple II with integer basic and you have a programmer's PROM in slot D0, this one's empty, it didn't have it. That's why I had to go on the monitor. They have a really nice memory test in there that you can run and basically check all the memory. If you can't get DOS booted, I have on my website a memory test you can potentially load through the cassette port and basically test all the memory. But you gotta have enough go in there that you can get a prompt. Also, app test, which is a I forgot who put it out. Is a set of like test utilities for the Apple II. They have a memory test. Usually, if you can get that far, the system's working. but anyway, next slide. Okay, and here's kind of a block diagram of the system. This is out of the Red Book, and it's another reason why I like the Red Book. If you have like a problem, you know, you got a problem on an address bus, you can look at the address bus here, or for instance, the data bus. This is pretty accurate. It contains all the components of the system that touch the data bus. So if you've got like a bit stuck on the data bus, it's got to be one of these things that are shown on this. And I find this block diagram in the Red Book pretty useful. The other thing I mentioned, if you're having trouble, you got nothing, check the clock system. Make sure you're getting a clock out of the system.
Are the arrows flow of data or flow
Yes,
of control?
it's flow of data.
Not control.
Yeah. So, next slide. So I'll just talk a little bit about rework. If you gotta like, most of the time it's a chip, right? But if you got a bad socket, you gotta replace the socket. I think there's 2 options. If you have a rework station that'll suck the solder out, those work good, I hear. I've never used one, because I use this one. I cut up the socket, because I figure the socket's bad, just cut it out of there, and then you can remove 1 pin at a time using a plain old solder sucker. And but it would be very time consuming to try to get a socket out without a rework, you know, a rework station, unless you cut the thing apart and get 1 pin at a time. Okay. Any questions? Am I going too fast, slow? Level of detail, okay?
Yeah,
So what's a rework station?
It's a basically it's a soldering iron with a vacuum attachment on it, so it'll suck the solder right out of the hole. Otherwise, you got to use. Actually, I have one downstairs. Come by my booth if you want to see one. There's these little things. They're spring actuated things, and when you get the solder melted, you push the button, it goes whoop, and it sucks it up. But
You can use a little solder sucker too.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
Okay.
It's a little blue metal thing. You get a Radio Shack.
one of the best rework people I've ever known used a little bulb, rubber bulb. She was good, but
You have to be careful with the
Yeah,
rework stations
essentially.
too. I have a rework station. You have to be careful not to scratch the board because the solder suckers have a soft tip. Even the metal one that you have, the end tip in the end is soft. The rework station, the tip is metal. It's a soldering essentially. You touch the solder, and you pull a trigger and it sucks it out. But you got to be careful. You're only touching the solder, not the board, because you can scratch it. I had to practice a while because I didn't want to go near the board I was working on until I practiced and I scratched a few old boards doing it. It took an hour to learn how to use it right.
So one of the keys to getting solder out is you got to make sure you melt it all and you get enough heat down there. Sometimes it's beneficial to add some solder because the solder will act as a bridge to get that heat into the hole or whatever. So sometimes it's kind of counterintuitive. You want to get solder out and you're adding it, but you're adding it to get a good heat transfer because you gotta. If you don't melt it, it ain't coming out. Bottom line. So you got to get the heat there. But turning up the temperature on your soldering iron probably what's going to result in lifted lands, and so you got to be patient. If you got an area like, especially like on most like 74 series ICs, pin 16 is going to be power, pin 8 is going to be ground. There's going to be a lot of copper connected to that because they tend to want to have a lot of copper to support the power and ground. So it's going to take more heat and it's going to be harder to get those the solder out of those pins. The Apple one's like got an area on the corner. If you look in the upper corner where the power supply is, it's just a mass of copper, and that thing is a major pain to both to solder and unsolder. Because if there's so much copper in there, it just acts as a heat sink. So it's actually even hard to solder parts onto that thing. So anyway, next slide, I guess. Power supply. I'm not going to talk too much about power supply because I've never. I shouldn't say I've never seen a broken one, but I've never seen one that wouldn't work. So I'm going to stay away from that pretty much. Go to the next slide. There's one thing I can talk. A couple of things I can talk about. Sometimes these on-off switches go, especially on the very early. They changed power switches through production. This is a very early one. Let's see, 47,000. It still has, well, they had a toggle switch at first, but for this second generation, these switches tend to go. And the first one that I bought this machine, the switch was bad on this power supply. So I took it apart, got the switch off, and it was a part number on it and a company name on it. I looked it up on the internet, they still made it. You'd be surprised how much of these parts, I mean, except for the Apple Proms, you can get every part on this board still. Not everyone's made, but you can still get every part on this board.
Mike, I've had some problems with the plastics line filter capacitors in these. I've had two.
Yeah, a lot of them go. I mean,
Yeah.
classic computers, that's the classic thing, right? The line filter capacitors go. I haven't had one go yet. I'm probably lucky.
Yeah, I've had two different power supplies. It's been a problem. I'd say if you were going to do this, we're going to work on it. I'd suggest changing those.
Yeah.
Because the problem is when they fail, they go short.
Yeah.
They make a lot of smoke and they smell really bad.
Yeah.
I just had one go 3 weeks ago.
So far I've been lucky.
Is it smell out of your house yet?
Yeah, thank goodness. I left the windows open.
How are we doing on time?
10:54.
Well, we got 15, 20 minutes?
20 minutes about.
Okay. Let me do something real. Well, yeah, let me take it apart. See how easy these things are to get apart. All thumbs. Some guy from Europe was trying to find these screws in Europe. They're like number 6 with an odd length. It was like, I couldn't even find them here.
They use different screws or different versions of the machine.
Yeah, the later machines have pan head.
Yeah.
I just recently found that if you go to the stores, the hobby stores that sell the remote RC cars, they have some of the oddest screws you've ever seen. Like number 2 screws that you can't find of strange lengths, stuff like that. So if you're looking for screws and you can't find them in like Home Depot or something, before you go crazy online, find out where all the RC guys go, because they have all these crazy screws for all their small little things that they have. You might pay, $5 for a pack of 5, but at least you're not paying having to buy 100 screws, paying $20 in shipping from some online source.
These are a lot easier to get apart than the early Macintoshes, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, but the Mac only has 5 screws. The trick is getting it to them.
Now, the only thing, you got a keyboard cable. Other than that, voila. Now, the reason why I took it apart, a lot of these power supplies are riveted. If you need to get in there, this one has one rivet in the middle, okay? The way you get rivets out, you know, I think they put this in to keep people out of them. To me, it's like, well, this is no problem. Take I believe this is a 1/8 inch drill bit. Drill the center. It's the same size as the hole, and the outer ring will like pop off, and you push it through. When I was racing sailboats, we were always riveting stuff on our boats. And the way you get rivets off, you drill a hole the size of the hole underneath. And the outside ring will just pop off around the drill bit, and you push it in. So this one,
But make sure you get the other bit of metal out when you get in there.
I was going to mention that, no question. You don't want shorts in there.
Yeah.
So this one, actually you may be able to tell, I have had this one apart. There's a newer rivet in there. But you probably wouldn't know unless I told you. That's to get this switch fixed when I got the thing. Now I found out later, somebody told me that worked in an Apple store. Apple sent because these switches were failing a lot, they sent instructions. You gotta pry the thing out and kind of solder it, you know, with the wires pulled through the hole and stuff like that. Me, I'd never do that. To me, this is not it's not a preventative for me to get in there, not at all. But I know, you know, you get a pop rivet gun, a 1/8 inch aluminum rivet, pop it back, and you know, unless I told you, you probably wouldn't notice this is a little cleaner than the other ones. And if you're somebody like Corey, you'd probably go in there and tarnish it a little.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
A little bit of oxygenated toothpaste.
But as far as like
Acid.
fixing these, I have no experience. I've never had to fix one other than the switch.
I've had a couple of the line filter capacitors go, and also I've seen the other electrolytics in there. I've replaced a couple of those.
Yeah.
But they're pretty reliable power supplies.
Yeah. I mean, this one has been good, except for the switch, since I think it was made around June of '79.
Have you, you know, because even though they may not fail enough to stop your computer booting, if you stick a scope on the rails coming out
They
of there,
look
I mean,
bad, but
yeah.
the power.
Personally, because having repaired switching power supplies for like, you know,
Yeah, but
Commodore
it's
stuff,
probably degraded.
if I
It's
ever get
probably-
in there, it's just for the sake that it takes 10-15 minutes to do, I'd always replace all the
Get the parts.
electrolytics.
Yeah, that's what I've done that too.
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
just-
the output electrolytics after the
I tend to redo the whole lot.
Oh.
You know,
I
for
know,
the sake of a few
I know
cents,
the
yeah.
antique radio guys do that as a matter of course, even
Yeah.
before they power them up. So
They're cheap enough, so.
Exactly.
do 'em all.
I've been lucky, I guess. The only electrolytic I lost was on a cassette tape recorder in the '80s that was like 1 year old.
Yeah, I actually bought an Apple IIe that was underwater, and the only thing that worked on it was the power supply.
It was what, underwater?
It was underwater, yeah. It was crusty and
Sold
cruddy.
or fresh?
Let's see what else we got here.
Next slide.
Yep. Oh, the keyboard. Now there is something everybody has trouble with. I think it's the most unreliable piece of this machine. Maybe most vintage computers. This is the one I got on eBay for like $50. It actually came with 2 keyboards. And I think this one was actually popped out and just separate in the box. It's got the you know, highly treasured dome power switch. And
Well, it's not even a switch, it's just a light on it, right?
is a light, yeah. Let's see if we can get this off.
That's where the chip extractors come in handy.
Yeah, they make.
Yeah.
I've never gotten one of those to work though, the little thing they make. I'm just always ripping my fingers off.
Yeah, that back has become increasingly closed.
Hold on a second.
Complain about that. software.
I
you
just
can
want
use
to
it
pop
maybe
one
commands.
keycap off.
Yeah.
There it goes. So these all pop off. No big deal. The switches under here are these old patented Datanetics. There's a few guys on eBay that sell these switches now. I forget the name of the guy. Apple Dan or something. Dan Appleman something. Asking like 13 bucks each for a switch.
Wow.
Oh, because they're hard to find.
Working, hard to find.
No.
How to, without
The
work.
thing is, if you got a keyboard and like you got some switches, a lot of times you get these, half the switches won't work. Well, because of the way keyboards work, they're all connected together. One goes bad, you know, you might see 3 or 4 that are operating erratically. Take that isopropyl alcohol, get an eyedroppers full, just squeeze it in there, in that mechanism, and work it in and out, upside down, you know, try to get the dirt out with it. I would say 95% of not working key switches can be restored, if not more. Virtually all of them can be restored. Isopropyl alcohol, squeeze it in there, work it up and down, you know, for a minute or two while you're watching, you know, your favorite TV show or whatever. If it doesn't come back, and just use an ohmmeter on the things on the back to see if you're getting contact when you push it down. You know, put it on sound mode. A lot of them now will make a little buzzing sound if you got a contact. Push it down there. Is it reliably making that connection when you push it down? If it doesn't work, leave it for a day. Let it dry out. Try it again the next day. You know, I had one, it took me like 3 days, but eventually it's as good as new. Once you get it, the dirt kind of work loose. If you have to give up and you've got these old key switches, you know, later on they changed to Alps, I think. They're easier to find. If you use your solder sucker or your rework station, suck all the solder out so the leads are loose in the hole before you unscrew it. Or else you have a chance of like pulling the, because that lead goes right into the connection. It's basically a wire that goes right up into that key switch. So make sure the leads are loose, they wiggle in the hole, then take the screw out, it just should pull out if you want to save it. The other thing, go to the next slide.
Do you want to talk about the RFI keyboards at all? That
Well,
okay.
first of all, this is the first keyboard they came out with. Unfortunately, these keyboard encoders, I'll make this comment here, these keyboard encoders is wired directly to this edge connector here, which I've never seen used. And unfortunately, it causes problems with static electricity. I actually fried. The one thing I know I fried with static electricity was one of these keyboard encoders. They're hard as heck to find, so be careful. This is the second version of the keyboard. No edge connector at the top. They still have the MM5740 keyboard encoder, but they moved it down out of the way because Apple was having trouble. I saw some website that had some interview with an early Apple employee, and I guess they were blowing through keyboard encoders at Apple like left and right. So they eventually figured it out, moved the keyboard encoder over here. But the circuitry is all the same. I had one where the repeat, actually this very keyboard, the repeat key wouldn't work. There's another 555 timer up here, and you can see this, that cap's a little different size than that one. No, that's a replacement to get the repeat key working. Okay. Talked about this. I talked about this decoder. This company, littledio.com, they're in the UK. Once in a while you see they have them. I bought some from a place in Canada and they didn't work. So you gotta, those things are a problem. I've looked at taking like an AVR and, you know, basically putting it on the same socket, but it's too much work for me right now, but it could be done. Next page. Okay, if you plug in the keyboard backward, they have non-keyed simple ribbon cables with dip ends. If you plug it in backwards, you blow up. There's two 74 LSO4s on there. You blow up one of them. Connected to -12. So that's an easy fix. You just change out the 74 LSO4. Apple ones, real Apple ones have different pinouts than Apple IIs. I think Vince Briel changed his pinout on his replica one so it works with an Apple II keyboard. I'm not 100% sure of that, but be sure what you're connecting to. And worst case, you can't get a keyboard. I have a kit I sell. It's like 39 bucks that you can connect a PS2 keyboard to an Apple II or an Apple I. Next page. Okay, disc 2. Talk a little bit about this. Next page. Here's a disc 2. It's my trusty screwdriver. These come apart easy too. There's two main things on disc 2s, as long as you don't plug them in wrong. You guys have probably heard about that one.
You're not plugged in over here.
What time do we got?
You got 7 minutes.
Okay, we'll try it.
See if we
I
can-
couldn't plug in
The
because
strip
it took a
doesn't work.
three-prong.
No, it's a 3-pronger, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's on an adapter. No one knock Mike's laptop over.
Oh,
It's a mag lock, but don't trust it'll let go.
some people came in after we submitted our cards to the drawing.
Yep, I'm giving away this poster here at the end, so maybe we can pass some of the index cards around. If you want to get in on that, put your name on it, and then slip it in that little black
He's got the black
Folder
Sharpie,
there.
I think, from earlier.
I can't put a second one in.
Okay, disc 2, 4 screws. You guys probably know this. Slides out backwards. Easy. So head cleaning. I personally would probably take the cover off to clean the heads. Maybe even that little board there. You can see the head in there. There's a felt on, this is single-sided, right? There's a felt on the top. You don't want to get that felt all full of isopropyl alcohol, but the head's underneath it. There's a speed adjust. On most of these, it's on this little circuit board on the back, and there's a little 10-pin trim pot. And you run this program called App Test on a scratch disk, and it uses, basically it uses 1 megahertz frequency of the Apple II to time the speed of the disk going around. And you always see this on, you know, the boards and stuff. I took one, and I want to see how, if it read disks, it was way off. So I went the other way, and I basically had the thing at the end of the chart on App Test, and it was still reading fine. Now, you might not be able to write it and read it on another drive, but it's pretty easy to adjust. A little screw back here. You just want, and there's like a little thing that goes back and forth depending on your speed. Next one. Okay. Before I go there, if you do plug it in backwards, I haven't done this fortunately. I don't know why. There's a part here, 74 LS 125. That's what I'm told will get burned out. If you plug it in backwards.
Have like a burn mark in it.
Do they? They
yeah.
blow up the chips? Yeah, I've
Sometimes.
blown up chips, but not in this way. So, but that's the part. These parts are easy to find. Vintage parts, I would recommend like Unicorn Electronics in Pennsylvania. The guy's great. He's got all the old 74 LS, the straight 7400 parts. Okay, I'm getting off the course here. Okay, there's some very old drives. If you're very lucky, you've got a drive that was shipped with DOS 3.1, very early days. That has a different timing to the in the detect circuit. The 3470 detect circuit has a little different timing for DOS 3.1. And when they came out for with DOS, I don't know if it was 3.2 or 3.3, where they increased the sector density, they changed the timing on the circuit that basically detects. They basically hold off. It holds off before you detect the next bit. They changed it. I have an early drive. It's like serial number 10,000, and you'll see on like eBay, these guys, somebody must have a warehouse full of Atari soft disks, like Centipede and whatever. They're selling them for dirt cheap. I couldn't get that drive to read those disks, because I think they use some proprietary copy protection. They use half-track or something. And so what I did, next slide. See, this one here has a resistor. I think it's a 9K. They took that out, put a 7K in there, and put a trim pod in there. So I wanted to keep my my disc controller original, right? Because it's kind of a early one, right? I didn't want to ruin it. I ended up just lifting this leg out of the hole and adding a trim pipe back into the hole so I can restore it back to where it was. Adjusted it to about, I don't remember if I used an oscilloscope to time it, or I just changed it to 9K. I probably used a scope on it. And after that I could read these Atari soft disks. So they definitely improved the drive at some point. But that's very early ones. I have it on my website, what I did there. Okay, next. Okay, kind of back, covered the main sections. A lot of the stuff, I love this red book. I mean, they're kind of collector's items. Mine beat the heck. But for me, maybe the bigger type, in my old eyes, it agrees with me. The schematics are easy to read. It's got everything in that the later reference manual has, basically. I just like this book, especially the schematics. They do have the Apple II reference manual that came out later. That's very good too. There's a book, Understanding the Apple II. There's PDFs of this online. This guy really understood the Apple II. He really did an unbelievable job with that book. That's kind of after I get kind of like he basically took the disk to the whole interface, the whole system, figured out exactly how it works, down to the unbelievable detail. Basically, as far as you can get.
You know who the author was?
Jim Sauter. I don't know exactly how to say it. Just Sauter or something like that.
Sodder.
Sauter, something like that. There's a couple. This is definitely a PDF online. Apple II reference manuals PDF. The Red Book's in PDF online. But be aware, hardware changed as time went on. You know, things changed. The video circuitry changed, a number of times to make it better. If you go down and look at my exhibit, you'll see how crappy the video is on a TV, and they basically, tried to improve it.
What's HW?
Hardware.
Oh,
Hardware.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Okay, next. So anyway, I'm kind of back to the, and I could go through the schematics, or I could answer questions now, or I don't know if we're out of time or where we're at here.
Quarter past 11.
Quarter past.
I just
Yep.
have one quick comment. The best way I found to get keys off is with a staple remover. Not the pincher kind, but this kind that's like a flat pen. You can just slide it
I
under.
have one of those. That might save my fingers.
Those IC chip pullers work pretty good. Once you get one key top off, you can kind of get it in between the rows. And
Yeah, once you
pop 'em
get
right
one off, the first one's the hard one to get off.
If you're taking them all off, your fingertips are going to hurt after you get through the home row.
Yeah. But typically, oh, the other thing, the other thing I've done, to clean keycaps. Sometimes they're filthy dirty, you know, people type in dishwasher, put them in a container where they're not going to get lost or melted in the heater element down there. I had a set that was real bad on my original Apple II. I took them off, kind of wiped them down with Gojo, put them in a little open container in the dishwasher. They sell them for like baby bottle stuff, you know, just to keep stuff from rolling around in there. And it came out looking like new.
Again, without detergent, just with
Yeah, I don't put detergent in. I just rinse it because I pretty much just my ideal is to get the Gojo off, you know, and that residue. It takes a while to dry because there's a lot of nooks and crannies in those things. But
Out, you're saying cutting the pins instead
But
of.
the sockets, if the sockets are soldered in the PCB, if you got to replace the socket, sometimes these things go bad.
Yeah.
You got to pull it out. I just try to cut it so that I'm not cutting the PCB. It's kind of a delicate thing.
Yeah.
But you use a razor saw or something, and you cut the thing into pieces so you can basically pull out one pin at a time.
point is you're destructively removing it, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not
Point
going to
is,
reuse it, so
Oh.
it's just easier just to chop it up while it's on.
Take the
fire.
chip out
Point
first.
is,
Yeah.
screw the,
Yeah.
screw the socket,
Wow.
save the board.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can break it up with like little diagonal cutters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Just break
use
the
those
thing up
too.
into
Yeah.
pieces.
Okay.
And then as you desolder, you can pull little bits of the socket out. And,
Okay.
so it's a lot easier. That way you don't damage the board trying to pull it all the pins out.
Yeah. Okay.
Or have to put too much heat, because once it's apart, you can come at it
Yeah.
from the top and
Like if you meld all the solder. I
fire
haven't
on
tried
the
that
top,
one.
heat
That
it
might
up
be
and bottom, and
interesting.
just pulls.
Ah.
On
You don't
the
even need a solder
Commodore boards,
sucker
you get a lot
until
of
you go
like
to
the
the
I/O chips,
Yeah.
which are kind of 40
Okay.
pin
Yeah.
DILs.
Yep.
And I used to, you know, if the chip was suspect as opposed to definitely dead, you also don't want to destroy the chip. So the other way is just to mask off with tin foil or something just around there, and then use a heat gun. So you can turn the thing upside down and just use a heat gun if you're careful with the heat, and basically
Melt
all 40 pins all in one
The
go.
if you got fortunately these early apples I deal with are all socketed. All the ICs are socketed. If you gotta get like a dip chip that's soldered in out and you know it's bad, what that Rework person I mentioned earlier used to do is between the pins just take a little probe and like break the pins off the chip. And basically, you end up with 2 rows of pins, and the chip comes out, and you just pry between the leads. Do you want me to do the
Yeah,
more
do the
questions?
raffle.
Do you want me to do the raffle?
I think this
Sure.
gentleman had a question he was been
Yeah.
trying to ask, hadn't he?
Go ahead.
Oh, just about replacing the
Yeah, right in the
6502
black
with a
thing.
CMOS version on a 2 Plus. I know there's different schools of thought on like what you need to do, like either find a Rockwell 65 CO2 or replacing.
I don't know if I've ever had any issues. I don't know how many. I don't even know if I've tried it because the original 6502s are readily available for like $5-6.
Some software needs to see the 65 CO2.
CO2.
And I've done
I
that. It
think
works.
I've done it and it works. I don't think I've had any issue.
I didn't know if anybody knew Western Digital part of it.
Yeah, I think actually I did it on when I was doing that brain board thing. I want to make sure it worked with a 65 CO2.
Oh, I'm probably
One of those things I did. I actually put one in and I tried it and everything worked. But I can't say it's going to work every time. But
Did much Apple software make use of kind of the illegal opcodes and such like? Because of course they weren't
No.
available on a lot of the
No.
65 CO2s.
no.
What parts or components are disappearing?
On this board, okay, you've got the Apple. I was going to mention this. You got the Apple ROMs. Of course, those aren't made anymore. Sometimes they made a firmware board for a number of years where you can get like AppleSoft ROMs. They made 2 versions, one with AppleSoft ROMs, one with Integer ROMs. You used to be able to get this for $40 on eBay. Now people are asking $200. There's a way to take a 2708 EEPROM, put a socket in there, and you got to put an inverter on one of the lines. I forget what it was. It's on my website. But you can take a 2708 with an inverter. You take a little very small inverter, single 4-pin chip, stick it under the socket, and you can make a 2708 work. Some guy on the web sells a 2708 converter. That will not work in all cases. It won't work with a language card because he didn't do the inverter. I think it's the inhibit line. I have my brain board, which if you've got a prom burner, you can put a version of ROM and BASIC in there, and you can run a Apple II without any ROMs with a firmware board. Actually, you can't boot DOS 3.3, or you can't boot DOS with an Apple firmware board without ROMs in here, but I can do it with my brain board. I added a little extra. This is probably one of the harder ones to get, 2513. I think they use them ADM3s, some other early character generators. Those are getting harder to get, but they're still around. I don't think Unicorn has them. I've had to go to like obsolete chip vendors to get them, but they're still there.
That's the only ones you can kind of include with an EEPROM, kind of.
Probably. I haven't had to try it because I've been able to find the parts, but
I did it on a later Rev Plus
Yeah.
board.
yeah, it's not as much fun. The 2Es, they replaced that with a 2708 compatible socket, I think.
2764.
2764. Yeah.
Or the two EROMs are directly compatible with EEPROMs.
Other than that, there's a part up here, a 74 LS259 that a lot of normal places won't have, but Unicorn has them.